Sickle cell affects millions of people throughout the world across a wide range of ethnicities. However, sickle cell is highly prevalent in the Black and Brown community. Therefore, it is often perceived as a disease that only affects the Black community. Well, we're talking to Adrienne Shapiro, who is the fifth generation of moms in her family to have a child born with sickle cell disease. And Adrienne knows very well about the inconsistency of testing and results. Living your life, please help me welcome Adrienne Shapiro. Adrienne Shapiro, welcome to Living Your Life. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, we're so glad to have you because you have a great sickle cell story. My man, Dr. Hebert, how you doing, brother? Heal me once again.
Hey man, look, I'm just happy to be alive and living my life and want to hear about how Miss Shapiro is living hers.
Yeah, because living your life is what we talk about. You know what? Let's just get right into it, Miss Adrienne. Uh, for more than, and explain this to us so we'll know, for more than 120 years, okay, on this journey for sickle cell disease, it's been tearing your family apart. Okay. How does that impact your life? You talking about a lot of people, 120 years. Explain that to us. How is that?
Okay, so we'll just talk about my coming into it as being aware of it. So I was like the first generation where the mothers actually knew about the disease, right? They knew it ran in families, but as far as knowing the source and all about the genomes and being tested for trait and all that, my mom was the first generation to have that knowledge, right? So we're going to come into where I came into it. And so her thought was, her knowing all this going forward, she would be the last mother. So when I was born, we were aware that my mom was third generation, I guess, at that point, because she knew of the babies that had been born in her generation, right? And in my grandmom's generation. And so were like determined I was going to be the last one. So for many years, I mean, my mom was going to be the last one. So for many years, she would always talk about being the last one. And then once Marissa was diagnosed, and we found out that there was a high probability of being given a false negative, meaning you're tested for the trait and you're told you didn't have it. So in those days, there were two types of tests. There was one, the cheaper test, which was just done on a slide where they put smear and look. And then there was one that cost a lot more money in those days, the apheresis one, which spin around, and then you could see the cells actually sickle. So as part of our fight at that point as activists, that test was then outlawed because it had so many false negatives. And so we're going along, and then we're meeting with some other cousins, and we're hearing these stories about how, well, first of all, grandmom's brother, who was very smart and went off to teaching school, because in those days, Black people could not go to any college.
Now,
So
what years are we
oh
talking here?
God, I don't even know. So these had to be in the 40s,
Okay.
30s, 30s. No, 30s.
Okay.
So grandmom's brother, and they were outside of Houston. They lived outside of
Yeah.
Houston in
Well,
Moscow,
a lot
Texas.
of great things come out of Texas. Okay. I mean, Houston's one of them. I understand. Your family come out of Houston. That's a great thing.
Yeah, part of it. So
Yeah.
anyway, her brother had gone off to college, to teacher's college, right? And
Yeah.
then he was always the one that had the book smarts. But when it came to actually physically doing things, he would always say he was tired or he was hurting. And so they thought he was just lazy and had book smarts. And so he was off at school and he passed away suddenly. So we're like, yeah, okay, so we got that one. And then more stories are coming up. There was a cousin before that generation, so that must be the early tens, I guess. And that one was out. They were all picking peaches, picking fruit together in the family. And it was very hot. And she just passed away. She just, and so there were all these stories. Well, in those days, people passed away, right? There
Sure.
were a lot of things
Yeah. They
going on.
just passed.
There
Ain't
weren't
really no
doctors.
excuse. There's no really nothing. They just say they passed away.
Right.
Yeah.
Heat stroke. It was heat stroke. So when you put all the narratives together, it's like, no, this all makes sense, right? From what we know now, the effect of dehydration, right? The need for hydration, the pattern of pain without having any source, the fatigue, which is so interesting because we could trace it in our family generations back, the fatigue. Yet it was only this current generation where they've really started documenting the effects of the fatigue on a person with sickle cell disease.
Okay, Mr. Shapiro, can I just stop you for 1 second? Because as a scientist, as a clinical researcher, as a person, as a physician that had to almost got put out of medical school classes for saying quit calling sickle cell disease an inborn error of metabolism in the books. I just want you to know that I'm in awe of the stories that you're just telling. And the reason why is because the whole concept that sickle cell was the very first disease genomically mapped in the entire history of the world. And we're still not where we need to be, only is because of the color of the skin of the patients that get it. And not around the world. They have blonde-haired, blue-eyed sickle cell patients in Europe. But in this country, where the word white is invented, which was invented in this country, the fact that we're still dealing with this, with the information that we had 4 generations ago, it makes me know that there's a lot of work to do. But with people like you trying to head it up, people like me trying to head it up, Kier heading it up, we're going to have to get somewhere now. And I'm not stopping until we do.
And Ms. Shapiro, let me just tell you this, because see, this is where I'm concerned at. Because we talk about in the 1930s and 1940s. Thank God I was born now where they have medication and they can identify it at birth. Because what I cannot be, and what you just said, Mr. Shapiro, people just passed away with sickle cell and they just said they passed
Oh,
away. No,
no.
I was picking. You said they were picking peaches and they just passed
Passed away,
away.
laid down and passed away. But
Yeah,
no.
well, I need you to know why Spates died out here picking these peaches. I died from dehydration from sickle cell. I ain't just passed away.
Yeah.
No. And that's what's so crazy because that tells you how we look at sickle cell over generations.
Oh, yes. Even when I started my journey and one of the into real advocacy work, and I was speaking with one of the researchers, and I was so upset because I had recently had this young woman die, and I said, she died, and he looked at me and he said, well, that's just sudden death. And I said, no.
Yeah.
No, it's not sudden death. There is more to this. And he said to me, this is a quote, well, she had sickle cell. And I'm like, oh, that's it. But 2 years ago, wait a minute, one thing to Dr. H's point, 2 years ago, when I saw him again, he came to me and he said, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I'm sorry I said that to you. And I was like, well, this isn't the only time I've heard a researcher say that to me, but thank you for saying that to me, because what that said to me was in a relatively short period of time, they're thinking about the process, right? And the researchers are thinking about things that they are more in tune to really now at this point of what's going on. And another mother is not going to hear, I'm sorry, your child had sudden death. Right?
Right.
Yeah. But
That's equal to sudden death is equal to passed away.
Yeah. Now,
that's what that's equal to.
And I'm going to go one step further. How many people in the United States that are Black died from COVID-19 because of hypercoagulability and decreased oxygenation that had sickle cell trait, and no one even knows that that's why they died from sickle cell trait because of COVID-19. And you'll never know because they weren't looking at it like that, because half the people in America, they don't even, more than half that have sickle cell trait of the 4 million people don't even know they have sickle cell trait to even tell anybody, and they ain't about to go do post-mortem analysis. You see what I'm saying? So this is bigger, man. It's bigger.
This is bigger. And also, when you go to COVID, I'm just going to say this is when we even talk about like racism, how it's actually built in to so many health related, I'm going to say algorithms, like how they chart things, how they, even the machines that we use, you know, the one to tell our oxygenation, or at what point our health providers are taught to be concerned, right, about our lung function, our kidney function, right? It's crazy when you really start looking at how, I'm going to say, racism, which was really created as a more of a financial, I'm going to say this, a political financial construct, right, for the people in power to keep the people, the underclass, right? And so those people who were elevated, right, had to go along with that political construct, because it's only once the government agrees with you that the government and those in power are going to give you money in order to study things. And so when we really look at it, it makes sense that that would become part of the healthcare system as it is now in this country. So I don't want to sound like a conspiracist because it's not. It's actually fact that that is it. We just don't talk about it. We just aren't made aware of it. And so, yeah. And so
You know, I totally get it because now you're a mother.
oh, yeah.
So you're a mother to a sickle cell patient. And then so knowing all of this now, when you're coming up with your daughter, you know, how did sickle cell affect your life as a parent? Because this has to take a toll, not just dealing with that, what you just went through with all the generations in your family. You find yourself back at this number one position, and that's a parent.
Right. And it's so interesting because as hard as I fought about being kind of a cliche of being, you know, this parent of knowing, you know, about the disease, knowing and learning everything I can, and this belief in science, we did fall. The marriage could not survive. Her dad could not deal. So there we go again, right? I had plans. I was going to go to medical school and engineering school, and I was going to do all these things, but I had to make a choice. You know, either I mother this child that was sick, and unlike a lot of families, mine said, just give her to us. We'll take care of her. Mom said, I'm here with your brother. I'll take her. You go to school. So I made a conscious choice to parent her, right? And so with that came, first of all, this life where I couldn't just make one decision, like wake up in the morning and say, oh, I'm going to school. I had to, there was so much planning. You know, I had to get to school. I either had to take her with me. Well, I took her with me a lot. She didn't, by 5, she realized that wasn't normal, but I had 5 years of carting her around everywhere. I had to have a plan for what if she got sick, right? I had to worry about the temperature, water, how far away I was from the healthcare center where I had to take her, because I couldn't dare take her to just any healthcare center. And so it's this life of constantly having not plan A, B, but A, B, C, D, E, F. I mean, it was health and safety first. And most people don't have to live their lives in this country. In other countries, yes, but we don't have to think health and safety first.
I'm gonna throw something out there at you. Think about your brain, at least, was programmed and developed to do things
That's
by
right.
process. Okay, so when you wanted to go to a movie, you had to call and listen on the telephone and say, "Hi, this is movie phone. It's showing at 6:15." Your brain, it was developed to have to go through a process to get something. Think about, which is 97% of the new young ladies that have a baby with sickle cell. Almost 98% of them had no idea that they had sickle cell trait. Okay,
Right.
so their brains are programmed and developed in a way where they try to figure out how they can get things to come to them. They want to see a movie, they press a button, it comes to them. They want to get some food, they press a button, it comes to them. They want to get in the car, press a button, it comes to them. So their brains were developed that way. So when they have a baby with sickle cell and they didn't even know they were going to have it, their brains explode. because they don't understand
Yeah.
the process that you're going to have to go through. You have to go out and do something to get something. Young people's brains aren't formulated and developed that way because that's just not how they develop now. So it's a
No, and
really bad thing.
no, and Dr. Hebert, let me just show you. Did you just hear the list of things that she just listed?
Yeah.
All the obstacles she had to do just by having a baby with sickle cell disease. You if you're young, you have a baby with sickle cell disease now, could you process all of that?
No, and I do.
Because
I do.
No.
because that's everything from where she lived, from her distance from the hospital to where she lived. That's something you got to process. The temperature outside, you have to process. All of these things that she has to do for one baby with sickle cell. Imagine if you have a family and there's two or three,
Or
and
even
you're going
other
today,
children.
even other children,
Right.
because you're gonna have to figure out how to manage who comes first in a situation like that,
Yeah.
your child or the baby with the sickle cell.
Yeah.
But you love them all.
Yeah.
In,
Yeah.
in
And I
this
think
office, right now, I have multiple patients with multiple babies with sickle cell, and they had no idea on that first one that they were going to have that baby with sickle cell. And some of them have hemoglobin SC and didn't think that it was a big deal because the babies weren't really sick. And then mess around, another baby had SS, and now their lives are because it's a very vibe.
Yeah, I think for me, I was going to just say that as a sibling, I think, and watching my mom, right, go through this process, and even though Marissa's diagnosis was a shock, I think, and actually the families discussed it, of all the kids of our generation, I was probably the most well prepared for this journey, but nobody can prepare you fully for this journey. I mean, sickle cell is such a, we call it the great interrupter. Your life is just from that
I
point
like
on.
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm gonna start using that. Well, I'm not even gonna call it sickle cell no more. I'm gonna call it now. That I would call it now. When I was dealing with the great interrupter. Yes, that's
You
it.
can't even see Kier's Texas star behind him because when he heard that, he did this.
Oh, I had to sit up
Oh yeah,
because
oh
that's
yeah, oh
something.
yeah,
The great
oh
interrupter.
yeah. And you wake
Absolutely.
up every day saying to it, "Not today, please, not today."
Not today.
But
Not
it
today. No,
it's going to
no, find
do what
somebody
it's
else.
going to
Don't do that
do.
today.
Right,
Yeah, and
not
it
today.
does. And that's a hard thing for everybody to understand
Yeah,
because, you know, they think that you should be able to do what they do. They really believe that, hey man, we're all going swimming. You should come on, get in.
it
And you be
is.
like, nah. Nah, the great
Oh,
interrupter says no swimming.
exactly. And you just babying that child. That's
Yeah.
you
Oh, you
just, oh
babying
yeah,
that child.
man up, right? Yeah, yeah. Well,
Oh yeah, all of those things.
all
And
those
so,
things.
like you had to deal with those things,
Oh,
even with my dad, it was certain things he just wanted me to do.
yeah,
Which would be a stress for me to do because he was a young parent when he had me.
right,
They
right.
were 20 years old. So he's not understanding by the time he's 33 years old, why is it so hard for me to go out here and cut the yard? I just have to go out here and cut the yard. He's like, boy, you can't work on my job. No, sir, I really cannot. Because he worked outside.
Oh
He
no,
worked with his hands.
no.
No, sir, I really cannot. I no disrespect that, but no, I cannot really do your job. That's why I had to find something else to do. And
Exactly.
so and there were different things and different treatments that we had today growing up. But
Right.
for you, it was different. So what were you doing to find the treatments for Marissa? How was that working for you?
Early on, I realized that two things. One, well, my mom was a very spiritual woman. So we would take my brother to prayer groups and everything, and they would lay hands. And you would have in those days revivals, and I would go as the only girl, and we'd walk through and wait in line, and the minister would lay hands on Teddy, and we would walk out. And my mom would look at me and she'd say, God is good, but science is going to fix this now. So I grew up with I guess having that ingrained in me, this faith and the science. So I always thought that science would fix it. So I watched all the science, and so I knew that at some point it was going to get fixed. So I had to be very mindful of how I parented my daughter and how she was going to be able to then function in the world. Not my brother did so well because my mom just held him. We all held him, but his life was very limited, and she was right about that, right? But I felt my kid was going to have to do all the things, go out in the world and do all these things. So, with that in mind, I was constantly following the science and asking questions. I remember asking so many questions till one time the doctor said, "Well, I don't know." I said, "Well, we'll go here. Philadelphia had a great clinic. There was a great clinics here, research going on." And I said, "Well, okay, well, we'll get this guy in Philadelphia." And the doc looked at me. He said, "Well, what if that person doesn't know?" I said, "Then we're going to get a whole lot of smart people that don't know in one room, and we're going to figure it out." So that was my belief. So I knew we needed science and support of science, but we also needed support for families because there weren't support for families like mine. So we started a little support group for the parents at our house, right? They would come to the house, and if somebody couldn't pay their bills, we hobbled together money. We baked pies and cakes and whatever to get money together to help each other, right? Because we knew that we had to form community and support for ourselves. So in the science track, they did discover bone marrow transplant. And so the father of this child that had one of the first here in LA came, and he was part of the member group, and he was saying their insurance wouldn't cover looking after his child if he had this transplant. And the child had leukemia and sickle, which is what made him a candidate for the transplant. And I remember we baked carrot cakes that must have been 5 layers, and we had to crack all the nuts by hand. I mean, it was crazy, but eventually he did have his transplant, and he was cured. And he, unfortunately, in those days, it was very early days. He still passed away, but he had an extended life period. And at that point, we just knew, all of us knew that it could work, something could work. And so just to follow the science.
Yeah, and because now, there are so many other treatments for sickle cell today. And there are a lot of things that give us hope for the future for
Right,
sickle
right.
cell, like in a cure,
Yes.
and treatment. So tell us, how did you find about Endari, which is a L-glutamine oral powder? How did you find out about that while you're just following the sciences?
Well, following the science and also trying to understand why there wasn't, to Dr. Hebert's point, why more wasn't being done. Why was it that we didn't have anything that went to the FDA? Why didn't we have studies, right? What was, and I was told it was because Black people wouldn't get in the studies. And there were all these reasons, but most of them all came back to us being Black. Well, really, what I found out was they were always only talking about the pain. So the FDA said, if you're going to come up with something, it's got to work against the pain, right? And it's got to be better than opioids. Well, there's a reason opioids has been used for pain for centuries, because it works. I mean, it works, and it
Why?
really,
Hey, wait a minute, Miss Shapiro. Why had they been using opioids all these years?
yeah, it works.
Because it
And
works.
and under controlled circumstances. No, you're laughing, but truly,
No, I'm laughing because it's a simple answer. It's right in front of your face.
and
Why do y'all want opioids? Because they
they
work.
work. And if you really look at it under controlled circumstances, they do very little harm, really, truly, to the body. And
Right.
so if I have my child who started opioids at 2 years old and I'm enrolling her in a, a clinical trial, and she goes into sickle cell crisis, and she's in this trial on these medications that are supposed to treat pain, and her pain is not abated, I'm going to say thank you very much and get my child and take my child to get some opioids. I mean, that's just the way it is. So it wasn't that, it was what the FDA was looking for. So the new treatments had to say that it would reduce pain, but it had to look at more of the mechanisms of the sickling in order to get to where it was. So though that is how we
How ironic is that? 50 years.
50 years.
50 years. We need to start looking at the mechanism. So instead of covering up all of the pain, we need to stop this pain before it starts.
Right.
How many times have they said it about every other disease besides this? Every other disease. No, you don't.
I don't know of any. I want to tell you the truth. I don't know of any.
Every other disease, you don't. It's like the chicken or the egg. There's a treatment in the chicken. There's a treatment in the egg. And right now, something like Endari, which is a amino acid, which is our bodies already have the amino acid, so it's not even really something that's going to be foreign to you as a person. So the side effect profile is so low. These are types of things that people had to step up and say, we must do something.
So it was the advocacy groups that went to before the FDA and mothers with their children who went and said, we need this. We need this. We need for you, the FDA, to approve these new treatments, right? Even though you don't fully understand the mechanisms, even though it's not been done before, even though it's hard for you there's a term they use like a method of action, MOA. So even though you may not comprehend what that is, right? We understand that it's a difficult concept and maybe you can't really see inside a body and how the body's reacting to it and everything, but we need this. And so it was that advocacy work that got things through. Now the Endari, the interesting thing about that is that Dr. Nahara worked for years at the UCLA Sickle Cell, it was Harbor UCLA Sickle Cell Center. And so we all knew him through there and the Children's Hospital. And so we knew it was coming, but it took him years to bring this to market. And so I was waiting with bated breath.
I'm gonna throw a monkey wrench in it even more because you took all those years to get through the FDA's thick skull about sickle cell, and it took all those years for them to approve it. And now, till this day, there are many states where you can't even get on a certain sickle cell medicine until you have failed another sickle cell medicine. Now, I'm calling for legislation so that we got 3 drugs. Man, don't be telling me I got to fail nothing. I should be able to pick whichever medicine I want. I'm 50 years behind. Give me a chance to pick whatever medicine I want. It's unbelievable.
Combinations of medication.
Right now, in some states, you can't even get Endari until you fail another medicine.
Yeah.
Wow.
That
is so crazy.
Medicare.
That's really true. Yeah. So what we're telling people now is, we're thankful to the pharmaceutical companies, which really I don't know. I don't want to have this conversation, but if we've got to find a way to make it so that companies will invest in finding treatments for people like my child, like you, that aren't going to go to market for huge amounts of people and make them tons and tons of money. But I have to say that the companies that have been helping with the sickle drugs have been amazing about trying to find a way to literally almost give the treatment. It's not a good business model to us, but you're absolutely right. The problem we have at this point isn't that there aren't treatments. The problem isn't that there isn't a cure. The problem we have is that we do not have access to good care. We do not have readily access to the new things. And we don't have a system. Can I say this?
Go ahead. I'm not going to stop you on living your life.
We don't have a system where there are no repercussions for withholding humane, sensible care from us, right? So the only way you can do anything is something really blatantly catastrophic, right, happens, right? Really, but we have nothing. We have, I have a thing I say where at this point we have, it used to be separate but equal, right? But we now have same, right? So it's no longer separate, but not equal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, it's only, if I didn't say this 100 times today, I haven't said it once. It's only going to be getting worse because
Oh,
every person, and let me say this. Let me say this. The right now, this whole week, I see 30 patients a day, and I've asked every one of them, did you know what happened at the Supreme Court level this week?
I was just about to ask you that,
They-
Dr. Hebert.
not one black person even knew because they're all
Affirmative
basically
action.
under the age of 25 to 30, and not one person knew. So if we think that all of a sudden now we're going to get new therapies, it's going to get worse.
it's going to
It's
get worse.
going to
Yeah.
get worse.
And I
Yeah.
think that you have the point, because we had always looked in my generation. So my mom, they were all civil rights and everything. And so we'd always looked for the federal government thinking that it was going to protect us. We always knew that you could find out in the neighborhood or the city which areas to go into, which freeway exits to take and not exit on. You maneuver, but you always thought that the federal government would have protections for us. But what we know now, we really know now, is that in this current atmosphere, that's all off the table. And if you and so I've living in LA, I've seen what happens when there are riots and the federal tanks are going down your street, and the federal government shows up in all its might. Well, the federal government is showing up in all its might in so many ways, insipid ways now. In this whole thing about the opioid, it's CARE, I guess it's the medical database that's in place to measure and monitor how many opioid pills a patient gets, or shots that are in the hospitals it's everywhere. It's all connected. So they will know if Marissa, oh shoots, sorry, if we travel from, let's say she has a doctor's appointment today, my child, any child, or any adult, and you go to the pharmacy and you get your pain pills for the month. So you get 90 tablets. And then we fly to Houston to visit an aunt. And oh, she doesn't have her meds, right? The minute we get there and we realize that, okay, now we've got a problem, what do? We go to the pharmacy. They know immediately how many pills she's had. Like that's her allotment. We can't mail them, because if you mail them, then that's a federal offense. You're
Yeah.
mailing drugs.
Drug trafficking.
It's
Yes.
crazy. Or you're in the hospital and you've got pills at home which you're not allowed to bring to the hospital. And if you could control your pain at home, there's no way you're going to be in the hospital. But that system in the hospital, when the doctor puts in the orders for you to get a shot of opioids, it comes up and says, well, this person got 90 pills on Thursday and it's now Sunday. And doctor, what are you doing? What are you doing? Do you want your license? I mean, this is insane. Your healthcare, they're not, the DEA and the federal government are not doctors and should not be in medicine. But if that insipid, and I feel like everybody's now looking for an exit plan. I mean, it's like Marcus Garvey days. You want the ship, you want to go back to somewhere to do, plan B.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Ms. Shapiro, you've done a great job today. Is there any last words you would like to leave with, and what organizations you supporting as well too, before we get out of here, about advocates and caregivers and parents? What would you like to say to them to empower them to understand what's exactly at stake?
I want to say to them, really, they're it's sad. It's really sad, and it brings me to tears. But your child's future is at stake. Your well-being, your life is at stake. This journey is hard enough with the physical thing, the thought that you have a body that's not working in the way that bodies are meant to work, right? And you have all the stresses of these generations, and they've proven it, where we're handing down stress from the previous generation. So I want you to really think about that, and to try to think of ways in which you can help yourself in the knowledge of knowing it, understanding the burden that you're carrying, understanding that burden and giving grace to yourself is really important. If you have a young child, sickle in the beginning, I'm going to say this, it sounds really harsh. In America, our children live past 5. 90% of our children live past the age of 5, and that's because as children, they get good health care and they're young. In other countries, it's the reverse. It's only 5 to 10% of those children who survive. So our children survive only because we have access to medicine and hospitals and this knowledge and clean water, things that we a lot of times take for granted. We we get lulled into a false sense of it being only as complicated as it is when they are children. But sickle, as I said, the great disruptor, it disrupts things that you can see from time to time, but the invisible disruption happens. The child's not in pain, you're not in pain, but your organs and things are being broken down. And so we have to fight. Our fight really is to have good care, to be treated humanely when we go into a hospital, to have that expectation, right, that we're going to be treated well. And I think we forget that. And until we remember that and own it and start using the processes that are in place to document it, to fight against it, there's not going to be any reason for the powers to be to really give us what we deserve. And so we have advocacy groups. We have Sickle Cells in DC, who's there fighting things on the federal level. We have here in California, we have Kier Wellness, we have Access Advocacy. We have a network of advocates that we've trained throughout the country. You should never be at any point of care where you're not being treated well and be alone. You should never be alone. We have to document everything. And we have to get out of, you have to be okay with running the risk to speak up. What is it? Good. You have to get in good trouble here. And I never liked sports analogies because I grew up with all boys and there were sports all the time. But Kareem Abdul-Jabbar does an article and he talks about having to pay the price for speaking up. So we have to be willing to pay the price for speaking up. We have to be willing to make people, even our own community, uncomfortable with us shining a light on what's really happening to us. So I just want to say thank you again for having me, and and Dr. H for all the work you do and speaking up. It's not an easy thing, but I have 5 generations that I carry, and I know that I could really be the last, but there's work to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I tell you what, you were absolutely fantastic, Miss Shapiro. Hey, Dr. H, I just love this conversation. I love the fact that you're an advocate. I'm glad that you are just on top of everything. Oh my gosh. Ladies and gentlemen, there she is, Miss Adrienne Shapiro.
And the mommy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on Living Your Life. We were so glad to have you.
Thank you.
No, thank you, man. Dr. H, as always, man. These conversations are getting better and better, Doc. Absolutely. I think we're making some progress, brother.
We're making some progress. Now all we got to do is carry it over the finish line, and we're going to do it, brother.
That's right. Hey, thank y'all so much for joining us here on Living Your Life. We will have another episode for you. See y'all next time. Man, that was great right there.